then listen to the music, the samples that they have, and I got hooked and bought two of their CDs.
Oh, that's awesome. They picked up the physical copies.
Yeah, well, I'm all about the physical copy. I just the
I get what you mean. I buy vinyl records. If I really love an album, I'll
the
buy the
CD.
vinyl record, even though I don't have a record player. Which,
Oh, okay.
yeah, might be a bit sacrilegious
Yeah,
to a lot of
I like
musicians, but
buying the music. Oh, also too is for vinyl, you need to have room. Because the CD, you still need room, but not as much as vinyl. You know, and
one day
I
that's my
currently
goal is
I
to one
buy.
day be able to listen to all the records I've collected. Just invite people over, check them out. I think that'd be a good way to show them.
Well, years ago, I did um, was a part of this group of people in Southern California that had listening parties. Whenever someone got, let's say they got, a new CD, they would go say, "Hey, I got the latest you know, thing, come over." And another guy did a very interesting thing. He did by country. So if you were have bands from Italy, they would have Italian food that night. So whichever country and or region that they were focusing on, they would have the the, the food, and if people like to drink the beer, they would get the beer from that region.
That's cool. I mean, I
So
think
it was kind of
I wish people would do that more. Recently, I met up with a friend and I was just showing him a few songs. We were hanging out, and I realized after the fact, I was like, "Hey, man, we should do this more often." I can't remember the last time I have since I don't know. It's been at least a decade since just meeting up with people and throwing something on. I mean, I think that's what makes you attached to music is whatever life was in that moment. It lets you connect so much more with the song. And if you don't have an experience to connect to it, it's harder to find something that's really meaningful to you. Maybe you can. One of my favorite albums from the past year, I found by myself just playing video games, and it was on in the background, and I was just completely enamored by it. Makru by Tigran Hamasyan.
uh,
But that's a rare exception for something to do that. Usually we need like some kind of cultural connection to it. So yeah, I like that
right. I
idea.
mean,
It's a way to hear things that I would probably otherwise not come across.
exactly. That's um, and also too is uh, going back, you got the physical media that I always buy, um, especially when I can afford it. And then what I do is, since I'll put it up on the shelf, and it's like not all I don't have time to always go and pull the CD off of the shelf to go listen to it. So I would usually put it on, a thumb drive when I'm listening to in the car. Or, I mean, if this is for some people, this will be sacrilegious for me to say that I use Spotify.
I do as well,
You know,
but I find a lot through Spotify. If there's a better way to find music, a more convenient one while I'm driving around, let me know because I would love to use it. But if I come across something that I really like, I will buy what I can from them,
oh yeah,
But Spotify is just it's hey, I'm on there getting paid, making no money from them, so I get it that musicians don't make anything, but it's
well that's what I tell people this. I said, okay, if you can use Spotify, at least buy the band CDs so that they
if you
got
really like it,
yeah,
everyone's got their chance on Spotify to like audition. Every musician on there is giving you their pitch, and if you like it, go buy it. But I don't think you should have to pay for all music. It should be free. And pay for the stuff that you believe in, and you're like, wow, I'd love for this band to keep doing this. If you hear an album and you love it, give them money so they can keep doing more of that.
Oh
But
yeah.
there shouldn't be a lock on the access to music. It should be out there for everyone to hear.
Now I was looking for it online. When did you guys first meet and become Head with Wings?
Uh, our debut was in 2018, but
Yeah.
technically we did release in 2012 an EP, or 2013 rather. So there was a bit of a complicated forming of the band where there were a few extreme different lineup changes real fast. And we weren't the lineup of our first album until 2012. We met 6 months later. We put out the first EP, and then we spent a few years after that kind of just refining what we wanted to do musically, like who we were, or what we were trying to say. And then in 2018, that's when we did essentially our debut, when we released From Worry to Shame. So actually, yeah, when you mentioned you have both releases, yeah, that's the one that's From Worry to Shame. And then its follow-up was Comfort in Illusion.
Yeah.
Before both of those, we did Living with the Loss, which I think is available on Bandcamp, but that was I think more of us just like feeling each other out as musicians in the beginning. We had just met, and even to me at the time, prog was like a very new genre. I didn't even know about prog until I had met Josh, the singer of Head with Wings, and he introduced me to it. Because bands like Rush, I guess, would be considered prog, but to me, I didn't grow up knowing them as that. It was just classic rock to me.
Right.
They were like Black Sabbath, Led Zeppelin, like Rush is in that category of bands. I never thought of them as something outside of the norm,
Yeah, I think categorizing music nowadays is a tricky thing, because a lot of people want to be, I've seen some prog bands that they are they are textbook prog, but they don't want to be known as it.
Right. I mean, I think the problem, prog is kind of an off-putting word, I think, to people that don't know what prog is. And especially it's such a wide range of things. Prog doesn't mean anything to me. And what it once meant, the word anyway, what the word should be is just forward thinking. Like you're willing to break the rules and just free form, do what you want. There's no limitations. Doesn't mean you have to always be obscure. You can do an ABAB kind of song,
Right.
and have like obscure you don't even need to have obscurity, really. Like if the song doesn't call for it, then don't do that. It shouldn't be about, I mean, for me, that's a lot. Some prog now has fallen into a box, just like mainstream music. Like it has its certain, all the songs are constructed similarly. There's that box that they got to follow of rules. And some prog will do the same thing. It'll make sure it has its own list of rules, but they're still rules. And if you're not following those rules, you're not prog. I mean, we actually are not technically considered prog. We've had the not argument, but our work thus far has been reviewed a few times by Prog Archives, and according to them, we are not progressive rock. So I don't know, do they have the final say? I don't know who does, but
that's the thing, is like I think you said it best, forward thinking. You're taking the music to a new level, and I don't like bands that have to have like a million notes per second in each song, because then it's not really a song. It's just something that people are showing off. I mean, I need melody in the music.
Yeah, in most cases, I'd agree with you. I'd say there's a time and a place for everything. Like there are definitely chords that don't work anywhere, but I guarantee somebody could find a place for it. I sometimes really actually a band that does a lot of decisions that I would normally be like that would never work anywhere. You ever hear KO Dot?
I heard
Um,
of them.
it's avant-garde, but there's a lot of musical decisions that if I were writing a song, I'd be like, no, that would never work. But a lot of the things they've managed to do with it is impressive in that like, wow, these some of these ideas that just should not work in any circumstance they pulled off. So um but sometimes it can be very anxiety inducing or unsettling, but if the song calls for that, especially when you have some of these like Prague likes to do a lot of concept albums, or really you have a 20-minute song, you need to have those moments where you really feeling these strong emotions. Otherwise, like, what's the point in this long expedition of a song you've put me through, unless I'm going to really feel something and make it worth that amount of time.
Exactly. That's that's so true. I mean, and I've seen bands that pull off those long songs with, almost like it's second nature to them, and I've seen some that are very forced, almost like they took several different songs that weren't connected, and
Yeah.
they just spliced them together, and to make a long song because, you know, their prog credentials, they have to have those. And it's like, no, I think if you force the sound, the, the audience is going to know.
Yeah, when I always lean in favor of the song, like do whatever's best for the song, whatever it needs. You're talking about forcing songs to be long on the album we just finished recording that hasn't been released yet. One of the songs I wrote, and my whole premise behind writing it was I want to write a prog song that's 10 minutes long, and did that. But ultimately, we ended up dialing it back. I think it's like 8 and change now, because there were some things that were just like, it's just too much here. We need to dial it back a little bit, and
Right.
maybe one day I'll reach the 10-minute limit,
It'll
just to
probably
say
come.
I did. But if it doesn't, I'm not going to force it. If the song isn't letting it happen, then get rid of it.
Yeah, that's the one thing that a lot of prog bands in the 90s and the early 2000s kind of, I would say, fell victim to, that they thought that they had to force and make that epic, at almost at all costs.
Well,
And
there's a lot of tropes that bands of an era will fall into. It's like um Bill Burr makes a joke about it, but in the 80s you had all, like during hair metal especially, every band would have that one ballad on the album.
right.
They'd have all those like heavy hitting like single type of songs, and then there's the ballad, and they needed to have it. It was the formula.
Yeah, and it's like, a ballad is good if it's done right. If it's not done because everyone else has one out there,
Yeah, and I can be a sucker for ballads. I love pop music, so things like that are I enjoy them quite a bit.
Well, I've been, you know, going back and listening to stuff that was on the pop music of the 80s and some of the 90s, and and really listening to them, not just, having them in background. And some of them are like, wow, you know, it's just amazing. And then you have these, pretty much disposable pop music, which I think, unfortunately, that's a lot today. It's basically what's the song of the day? What's the album of the. Well, I don't think that many people outside of our circles view music with albums. They do view it more with songs. They,
I'm trying to. I think for me it depends. I think it depends on the album for me, because um, you take a band like Led Zeppelin, for example. For me, Physical Education is just like it hits really hard as an album. So that one I remember as an album, but then Led Zeppelin 1, 2, 3, 4, like I get kind of lost in what's what at that point, and then I just look at songs. But for some reason, oh, I said physical education, physical graffiti.
Yeah,
Um, that album is just it portrays itself differently, I think, than the way the rest of those albums are sort of like piled on to me. I didn't grow up in that time, so when I came across them, I found just like their entire discography in a pile, you know.
right, right.
So something that has a unique name, it's got an album cover that I remember looking at, like I could picture it in my head now. Um, that is much more stand out. So I could definitely talk about that album to somebody much more so than uh,
Yeah, any of the
any
others.
other ones. I honestly couldn't even tell you if you picked a song that was anywhere else in their catalog. I couldn't tell you what album it was on. I
Yeah,
guess the Beatles are sort of the same for me too. I I think maybe it's just my age. I'm 33, so some of these bands that were long before my time, I was just exposed to everything at once.
right,
Though with I guess it depends on when I came across them too, because I grew up listening to Iron Maiden a lot.
right.
So they have an extensive catalog, but with them, I could pretty much tell you where everything came from because they were the one of my favorite bands growing up,
Right.
and probably the one of the first bands that I really would buy up most of what they had, what their catalog was.
Oh yeah, I think it's like such a joy when you find a band that you like and that you know, you basically when you hear it, it's like all of a sudden you just kind of drift into their music and you just especially when you listen to it on headphones. I mean, you're getting everything right at once, you know. And that's why I like listening to my music. I mean, when I listen to it in a car, I feel that the noise that's coming from the speakers to me, it gets less and less and less and less. But when you listen to it on the headphones, you're getting all the sounds. And the way bands record them today, it's some of them sound like you're hearing, you know, like the guitar up here, bass down there. You know, you're hearing them in different locations in almost, I want to say, kind of like a surround
Oh
feel.
yeah, I get what you're saying because I drive a service van, so there's all kinds of noise going on. I do listen to music in my van, and usually I'll actually find a lot of new stuff in the van. But um, that Tigran Hamasyan album we were talking about earlier, Makru, that one when I heard it in my van, and I was like, yeah, you know, there's some cool stuff on here. But once I listened to headphones, I just like broke down emotionally. I had to like everyone that would potentially listen to it. I reached out to and tried to get them to listen to that album.
Oh yeah, you know, I when I listen to yours, especially the the debut album right there, I it sounds different, but then there's there's something familiar about it, and I can't really pinpoint it. It's like I feel like I heard it before, but compared to what the rest of the stuff that I've been buying lately, it has a unique sound.
That's good if we've managed to pull that off because I don't know if there's a word for that. Having that where it's familiar to you, but it doesn't sound like it's ripping something off.
Right.
It almost like pulls you in a little bit more to it. Like, I was listening to a song earlier today. Haken put out a new single, and it kind of reminded me of this Port Noir album that I like quite a bit. It was pretty different in its own way, but it was familiar enough to me where I was like, oh, I knew I already liked the other album quite a bit, so that like made my brain more receptive to this new thing I was hearing. Even though it was, you know, different in its own way, it still was like I'd been primed for that music already. And I think that's the hardest selling point with progressive rock for people that don't listen to it is it's like their brain is not primed to listen to that kind of music. They don't know how to take it in. That sounds
Right.
very pretentious of me to say, but
Well,
I was that way at a point too. I've only been listening to it for a short period of time in the grand scheme of things.
Well, yeah, progressive rock is something that you got to sit down and listen to. You know, general or mainstream rock and stuff like that. You could do other things and you're still listening to it, but it's not. You got to pay with prog. You got to pay attention, and sometimes people, don't have that big attention span.
I'm
Um,
guilty of not having a good attention span. I very often will listen to new albums while I'm playing video games or something, or while I'm driving. It's very rare that I just sit back and only listen to the album. I will now and again, but um, the when something is really great, when it pretty much can demand my attention, though. There have been albums recently that I've listened to where I'll have it on in the background, and something about it is so captivating that I stop whatever I'm doing to really take it in. And that's, to me, that's a testament to the album that shows like this is so strong that it demands your attention and it will have it. A lot of other stuff, I guess, it sounds kind of like messed up to say, but I feel like it's if it can't catch my attention that way, then it might not be deserving of it. At least for me, I'm
sure.
not interested. If it isn't gonna grab me, then I just don't care enough, you
Right.
know?
That makes sense. It's um, you know, you're 33, I'm 56, so I have a couple more years on you on listening to this genre of music. But there's a lot of these bands that are, they're kind of retro, and while they got great musicianship, it's like they're not really being progressive. And I think some of the older generation, um, older than me, they're not too keen on trying something new. They want to kind of stick with what they know, you
Well,
know.
most people are that way. I mean,
Yeah, and it's like for me, I know it's usually as you get older, you stick with what you know. But with me, I think I'm doing the polar opposite. I'm just grabbing things from all different genres, and
do you it doesn't even have to be of all time, but do you have a favorite progressive act? I mean, even if it's your favorite in the past year, like what really jumps out at you?
the one that really jumps out at me is King Crimson,
What album?
Red.
Okay, Red is the only one that's really pulled me in so far. I've only recently been listening to them, but Red has something real special about it. It's got some great stuff on there.
Oh yeah,
And I could understand how that came out in '74, right?
yes, yeah,
I could understand how I remember when I was listening to it, I was imagining like if it were 1974 and that album dropped, how awesome that would be for the time. Like that I wasn't there, but to me, that feels like that would have been revolutionary. Like that just would have changed everything. You never would have heard anything like that before.
no, no. I mean, just the power that
Yeah,
comes from it.
and those some of those guitar riffs are just like filthy. They're so good, and that like the way they capture the drums on that album too, just how it interacts with the guitar work. It's some really cool stuff. I really appreciate it. I have also a pretty uh, come from a bit of a metal background, and so I'm really in. I was into gent for a while before it. I think it became a little bit out of control as a genre, but I like the idea of it.
Right.
But some of the stuff they were doing felt very much like it could have inspired what that's the sort of metal those genres of metal became one day.
Yeah, I mean, recently I heard that, the guy Kurt Cobain cited Red as an influence. So
Yeah,
it's
I
like,
guess that makes sense. That's the like the evolutionary line that they were at the
yeah,
beginning of it for metal.
yeah. And it's like, it's so funny. It's like some people don't realize how much happened in the 70s that affected everything since. They were doing things in the 70s that I played a song for my cousin. Now he's into like the 80s goth rock stuff. And I played a from that guy Brian Eno. I played a song Third Uncle. And Third Uncle was done in 1974. He knows Third Uncle from a band called Bauhaus from 1980 something or other. And he goes, and I said, but that one came out in 1974, and it sounds like 1980 something. So it's like they were revolutionary,
Yeah.
and they did even if even if you even if you don't say they influence you in some way, they influence what you're into.
Yeah, if nothing else, like they might not personally have an effect on you, but they influence the culture that created what does influence you.
Exactly. Now, one of the you were talking about metal. One of the progressive metal bands that you know I always go to is Fate's Warning.
I've heard the name, but I actually am not familiar with them.
I actually think that they're from Connecticut.
Really?
Yeah, they're from Connecticut, and they're really. I mean, they're not. The guitar player just plays the notes. He doesn't go into these um, crazy solos all the time. That's the one thing that puts me off a lot. Let's say bands like Dream Theater. I mean, I like the music, but
You
it's
don't
like,
like the really shreddy sort of playing?
yeah, yeah, it's like calm down. Let the song breathe. You
Yeah,
know,
yeah, I know what you mean. I think as much as I have a short attention span and want a lot happening all the time, some music does feel like sensory overload for me, where there's so much going on. I don't know what it's like maybe I just don't know how to listen to that kind of music. Like we were saying before, you get like primes to listen to certain things. It's like it's too much for my brain. I can't. I'm not latching on to anything long enough. Um, but I don't know. I mean, you ever for metal? Are you familiar with Animals as Leaders?
I'm familiar with them. I haven't heard them, but I'm familiar with them.
Yeah, it's instrumental progressive metal. It can be like pretty spastic in a way where it seems like it's changing parts kind of fast. It's usually not like hanging out in one thing for too long. But I think that's what I like about it is it is kind of ever changing, but it's two guitars and drums. So as technical as they are, there's like room for everything. I think if they had a vocalist in there, then it would just be a disaster. And you
Right.
do get bands that are playing incredibly technical stuff, and then you have a singer on top of it, also fighting for melody. So then all I'm hearing is like all this different information coming at once, and I'm just not processing it. Some people,
Exactly.
I get it. They love that. That's like exhilarating because it's like just madness, but that's and they can really connect to it. I just struggle to, for the most part.
Oh yeah. I have a friend of mine that I've interviewed. He's in a band in Chicago called Aziola Cry, and they're a three-piece. It's a guitar, war guitar, and drums, and they're all instrumental, and they don't have those crazy notes. I mean, everybody plays, but it's like it's powerful kind of stuff, and that's the thing that I kind of my thing. It doesn't matter if you're heavy metal or a folk band. You got to have something where the song is breathing, for me to enjoy it properly.
Yeah,
And
just I think it's like sincerity in the music when just being real and putting like you know your honesty into the song, I guess. Not doing anything just because you think it should be that way, just doing it because it needs to be that way. And if the song needs to have 10,000 notes in a section, then by all means do it. If that's what makes that part awesome, then great.
oh yeah,
Um,
I agree with that. But I think if they do it all the time, then it kind of
yeah, at that point it's like showboaty, and
yeah,
I'm not too crazy about any of that. I feel like especially these days, there's at a point, people, I would have been really enamored by very technical guitar players, drummers, bass players, whatever. But these days, it feels like so many musicians are just like incredibly talented. It's almost like I'm desensitized to it. There's just so many talented people that I don't even acknowledge how amazing some of the things these people are doing in these songs anymore, because there's so many other people doing it that it's then it almost feels like, though I do think it takes a certain talent to do, if you could do more with less, you could make one note amazing. You shouldn't have to rely on 100 notes to convey emotion in the music. I mean, you can do that with your body. If you just really sell one note, you can do it.
Right.
As long as that emotion, sincerity, and honesty is there, it'll
Right.
translate. Or hopefully, I guess that's what we're all trying to do.
Right. Yeah, I also been watching some of the videos that you guys have on YouTube, and that's also a great way to help sell the band. You know, whether it's someone capturing you live, or you have a like a concept type of a piece, or the what do they call them now? Visualizers, where
Yeah, we're actually we're looking into that right now because for our upcoming album, we're trying to just get everything prepared for, and if we're pitching to labels, for example, we need to have everything ready to go. We need to have the videos mapped out, planned out, and probably finished for whoever to see, to basically to make our sales pitch a bit better.
right.
So yeah, we're looking into visualizers right now, but it's tough because think of like what's your favorite music video?
Oh my god.
Like
I
if
kind
you
of
ask,
lately it's been I like. I mean, I couldn't say a specific one, but I like when they put the lyrics up.
right? But that's what I mean. It's like challenging to think of a video and be like, that video killed it. It's really hard to. I feel like videos aren't that memorable, so it's hard to know what approach you want to do with the video. How do you want to make it and do it justice? I mean, you spend so much time on songs to make them their own thing and make them stand out, be unique, and do right by them. How do you do that with the video? And that's the thing I've been fighting with for a while. I mean, you look at our YouTube, we've tried a few different approaches to how to make the video. We did one that was all CGI. It was pretty much just a really, it was just a lyric video, a very fancy way of doing a lyric video. We did a live action one, which was off the first EP that was before our debut. The official song for When You're Gone on there, that was off the 2013 EP. And then we tried the, like silhouette, watching us play guitars kind of thing, live feed for Goodbye Sky. So we've tried a few different things just to see what catches, but it's hard with a smaller audience to really know what people want to see.
Right. For me, I like the lyric video because I like to be able to, I hear the music, but then sometimes I want to know
What they're saying.
what they're saying, because some people are very easy to understand, and the others, because of the way they sing, it's especially someone that does a lot of vocal acrobats, that and that you don't understand really what they're saying. So it's kind of nice to be able to
Yeah.
follow a lyric video. I mean, and then it's nice if someone does a video that has a concept around it, a little story, may or may not
That's
be
that's why we're looking down that route right now, is a visualizer that's a long lyric video. if I have my way, it would be the next album that we're doing is 35 minutes. And if I have my way, it would be one continuous visualizer that's a lyric video, unbroken, because I feel like this is an example of something I want listened to in full. It is broken up into 8 songs, but uh, it was written to be played from beginning to end.
Right.
So that would I hope we can pitch that one, and people are willing to buy into that. Is sitting down for 35 minutes, listening to this, watching this visualizer, reading it for 35 minutes, and it's a story. It takes place in a fictitious world that Head with Wings created, and this is the third part in the story. The first 2 records after our debut are not parts 1 and 2, but they're prior events to this story.
Oh, okay.
So that's why we want to try to sell that a little bit more, that this is a story, and with the right visuals, it'd be a little bit easier to do that, I think, than if you were to just hear these songs. We didn't want anything to be like to where you can't just pick it out of the pile, listen to it. Every song we wanted to stand out on its own, but there was a global thought that they would all be part of the same piece.
Well, I like this one. It's like a post-apocalyptic world.
Yeah, and that album was essentially the events going on in a character's head that happened in a song on the previous album. From Worry to Shame is on Goodbye Sky. In that song, From Worry to Shame, the character spends a year in seclusion in his house, and the album Comfort and Illusion, the follow-up to it, is that year. So we try. That's why if you even the way the songs lay out, of uncertainty, contemplating the loop of uncertainty in a house without clocks are the 3 songs on there, and they make out that sentence. So that's not actually the track order, but that was the sentence that was the idea. If you look at the artwork, it spells out them in that order: contemplating the loop of uncertainty in a house without clocks. But it, just for the sake of actually structuring an album to be sonically more pleasing, we didn't put it in that order.
Right.
But they're all tied together, and it's not really sent home that everything's the same story yet. We have thoughts for how we can do it in the long term, how to package everything together and really explain the story down the road, but we're still working that out, because for now it's we're a rock band first and foremost. So it would be a luxury if we could really do other forms of media that would really push this story and really demonstrate what's happening. But we're trying. We'll see how with this one, if it can be a little bit more clear.
Oh yeah, I do like it when people do where it's not really a concept album, but just kind of something that flows from album to album, where it's not. Only way I could describe it is like when you watch a TV show. It's like it's the same people in each episode, but it's not the same story.
Right.
It's like a continuation of, exactly what you were saying, the continuation from that song to this EP, and whatever else happens in the future.
Actually, we were talking about that recently, because I've been trying to get away from prog rock, because to me, it doesn't, the word prog rock, to me, it doesn't mean anything to people. So we've been just throwing ideas around, and the way you just said that, different characters into these other storylines, is we were looking at, like, does episodic rock work? Maybe not, but we're trying to think of something that says we're storytellers, and that's what we're trying to do with these songs. They might not always be about the same characters, but so far with all of our work, we've created a world that all of these songs just happened to fall into, and it tells stories of several different characters and their struggles. Um, so that's another thing that's pretty valuable to us as a band is those elements of it. It's like I said, we do put the music first, but these stories are integral to the music. It sometimes very much dictates why we make certain decisions because um, we're trying to really stress what these characters might be experiencing.
Right. Yeah.
And maybe and you probably wouldn't catch it without me telling you all of this. And I'm completely fine with that. I don't think sometimes concept records or story based albums they can be almost off putting because if you take one song out of the pile and listen to it, it like doesn't make any sense or it's
Right.
some strange transition that connects to other songs. We didn't want to do any of that. It's we tried to go like the single route with this where all the songs are their own songs because actually that album Comfort and Illusion there, the second one we put out, when we had to do singles, we were like struggling with that because none of the songs on that album are a good single. You know, like for the standard single that you would hear from bands, the way that they come out and how fast they typically are designed to capture your attention. Those songs all have intros, and you know we didn't even have songs with intros on the prior album, so it was uh it was a very different approach to songwriting, which we were conscious of on Without Intervention, which is our upcoming album.
Now you were talking about how you wanted to kind of not be classified as progressive rock. I've seen, and I'm trying to remember exactly where I saw it, that someone said almost like an alternative.
Yeah, alt prog is a genre I think I'm more accepting of, but I don't really know. It's so hard to define what any of it even is. To me, I think bands like Carnival would be alt prog, but to me, we're a pretty different style than they are. So
Right.
that's my least favorite question is when anybody asks, like, oh, so what kind of music are you? I don't really know how to answer the question. And the one guy ever that got excited when I said prog rock, he thought I was saying Prague as in the place. He's like, "Oh, I love Prague. It's my favorite place to go."
Right.
I'm like,
Right.
at first I was like, "What is he talking about?" And then it occurred to me after the conversation, I just let it go because he was so jazzed up about it. And that most people though, when they hear me say prog rock, it's like a big question mark over their head. Because even
Exactly.
for prog listeners, if you tell me there's this new prog band, I'm like, oh, okay. What does that mean? It
I've
can mean so much.
I've had several times when I'm talking to some people and they ask me what kind of music I listen to, and sometimes I'm like, what do I tell them? You know, it's like because I mean, it's right now the focus of everything that deals with music, you know, like TV and movies. What do they go to? They go to like the hip hop and the more I want I want to say more dance type thing, and so that's where everybody's brain is getting that into the, you know, and so trying to tell them I listen to progressive rock is like speaking a different language.
Yeah, it's progressive rock's function in culture is very different than I mean, you take like I don't know, so any dance song at a club. The reason that song exists is not well, I don't know, maybe ask the artist, maybe they feel different about it. But to me, I don't listen to that kind of music and really feel, I don't want to say enlightened, but I don't feel like I haven't been moved by that music. Very rarely do I hear something in mainstream charting music that is moving to me. Though I would say Adele can pull it off. She puts out songs that I'd say are pretty moving and they're in the mainstream. So it does happen, but dance music, you very rarely would hear it.
Right.
But I don't know. You take that's Mad World by Tears for Fears. I think the
Mhm.
cover is pretty moving. The original song was like much more dancey than the cover to it is a pretty moving song. So it's
Right.
interesting.
Yeah, I just said, I just told my friend, I said, I just listened to, kind of I just listen to good music, and it's like it's a cop out, but I just listen. It doesn't really matter for me anymore.
It's a
When I
good
was young,
answer.
when I was younger, it was specific. I needed to say I'm only into this music, and I don't care about the rest. In the mid '80s, I was into thrash metal. The early '90s, I was into, just solely into progressive rock. So anything that was not in that genre, it I didn't care about.
Yeah, I was
Yeah,
that way when I was younger, where I would go through phases of exclusivity, and it was like this style of music was all I would take in. But it's been a lot of different styles throughout my life. So now I'm at the point where I have my playlist in Spotify is boy bands to black metal because I listen to everything from Backstreet Boys to Cradle of Filth. I have a very diverse taste in music, and I don't care if they follow each other. I just love a lot of different music.
right. And I think that's something really honestly everybody should do, because then I look at the music I listen to is for moods.
Yeah.
Different moods. If I'm in a great mood, I want something upbeat. If I'm in a mood, something a little more, not doomy, but just kind of more chilled out. Just
Well, yeah, it's like most media. Sometimes you want to watch a horror movie, sometimes you want a comedy. Everything doesn't always need to be thought provoking. Sometimes you just want dumb shit, but
oh yeah,
there's a time and a place for everything.
I forgot what it was, but I posted on Facebook. I said, I'm watching this thing. I know it's dumb, but I don't care. I just it was the moment at that time that I needed to see this just stupid. Oh, I know what it was. Um, that Beavis and Butthead, their new their new little movie that they put out on Paramount.
Oh yeah,
It was the stupidest thing I ever saw in my life, but at that point, I needed to see something stupid.
yeah. Sometimes it's important. Like you need a relief from everything being serious all the time, and
That
music is no exception to that either. There's
exactly. I mean, sometimes you want just something, straightforward. That you can guess what's going to happen next, and then the next minute you want something where it's like, I've heard this band several times, but each time I listen to this album, I'm getting something different out of it. So it's like there's those two sides of me, that I like.
yeah, and you never know where you're going to be surprised. I mean, there's Owl City. It's like an electronic project. There it's definitely like people would say that's definitely a guilty pleasure of mine. I would say it's certainly not music I would generally tell people I listen to sometimes, but it you'd be surprised with sometimes there's a cool drum beat in there. You never know where you're going to find these interesting ideas. Um I guess don't be hesitant to try something out even if it's not something you would normally listen to because you never know what might catch you. There might be one song in there that they do something really interesting and take that one song out of the band, throw it in your Spotify playlist, and then that could be it.
Yeah,
There's
and
tons of bands I only listen to one or two songs from them by. It's sorry, the album's just not great, but that song you really did a great job on this song, but just didn't sell me on the album.
the other place that people could listen to, if they want to stream an album, is Bandcamp. I mean,
Yeah.
and that's where I got your CDs from. Um, and I I like how it's like, if I think it has that there. If you like this band, they recommend other bands that are you might like, and
How's their algorithm?
I think it's pretty good. I mean, they haven't put recommended me a hip hop band.
Yeah, I haven't been able to find an algorithm that's like showing me diversity while still like being able to accurately guess what my tastes are. So for a while, what I was doing was just going on to SputnikMusic.com, and they would just have ratings for albums on there. So I would just look up what are high rated albums, regardless of style, and check it out. And I did find some cool hip hop albums through there.
Yeah,
Um, you know, because like good music is good music.
exactly. It's like, and it falls into what your particular mood of the day is.
Oh
You
yeah,
could,
definitely. There's albums I listened to that I didn't like. I go back months later, you know, I'm in a different mood and it just now it's the right time for this album and it's catching me.
yeah. There's one by that band I was telling you about, Fates Warning, called. It's a concept album. It's 12 songs,
I'm gonna write that down and check them out.
and it's called A Pleasant Shade of Gray. And there's a on YouTube. There's a video of it where they put up the lyrics and of each thing, and it has like they're so different than Dream Theater because it's using more atmosphere. They even had Dream Theater's original keyboardist on there.
Oh, so
So
are they older band?
they've been around since the early 80s, and
Okay.
they've evolved over the years, haven't had two singers. I think the first couple albums where the original singer had a more Iron Maiden vibe to it, and then with the newer singer, he his vocals kind of fall into, Jeff Tate and James LaBrie territory. Just powerful.
So what do you recommend as a starting point?
I would say that album personally. I mean,
Which one?
Pleasant Shade of Gray.
Okay.
I mean, and this
Yeah,
is.
it can be tough when there's multiple singers. So I would imagine they have a pretty extensive catalog if they've been around for that long.
Oh yeah,
That can be overwhelming when you open something up and just like you have too many options. Then even then, I'm just like, I'll put on one album, like it, and then put on the next, keep going, and then I'm not really giving anything enough attention. I think a lot of albums, especially in this style of music, you need to listen to it more than once. If it doesn't catch you on the first listen, fine, move past it. But I'd say there's always more depth to it. It's not just surface level. You can get it on the first go. Even I listen to this kind of music all the time, and a lot of stuff. I listened to a new single that came out today by Haken, and once it was done, I was like, okay, I'm going to listen to it again because I know my brain can't just digest it all on the first go. I'll start to hear the melodies more on the second and third listen.
Right. I mean, that's this style of music. You need to listen to it a few times, especially if you review the CDs, because you can't expect someone to really give their honest opinion one listen through.
So you never give like an an initial review of things, or you listen a few
I would
times?
I would kind of give like you would call it a sneak peek type of a thing.
Okay.
Just kind of saying, just like you were saying, an initial feeling of how it is, but I always leave it when I say something and I said, but it needs to be listened to again so that I can fully take in, digest what the band or the artist is saying.
Yeah, 'cause, sometimes I'll have a stronger initial impression, like an album I was listening to earlier this year. My first listen, I was like, wow, this is actually my first listen, I didn't like it. But on the second one, I was like, wow, this is a 9 out of 10. Then after listening probably 10 more times, I'm like, maybe it's like a 7 or 8. But it's still a fantastic album. And by my standards, a 7 is still a great album.
Right.
I want to reserve 10 as an impossibility. Like 10 out of 10, no album is perfect. So the
No.
nines should be rare. That's one thing that's been frustrating for me finding music, because when I see so many albums, it feels like they have 5 out of 5 stars, 9 out of 10 at reviews. That, like, I need to, if it's that good, when I put it on, I should be weeping from how amazing it is.
Right. Yeah.
Like,
I've had some where they give like the four, like you said, 4 out of 5 or 9 out of 10, and I get it and I listen to it and I'm like going, I don't see it, or in that case, I don't hear it. I don't hear that nine. I maybe hear a seven.
yeah, I
I
use the
mean,
analogy a lot. When I was a kid, I used to read this Game Informer, and very rare, great games would still be like an 8 out of 10, but once in a while you'd see like a 9.5. I think there may have been 1 or 2 10s ever that I saw, but when you saw those, you didn't even need to read further. You could go out and buy that, and you knew unquestionably it was a great game. You were going to love it. That is how high rated music like that should be. Even if you give me a pop album that's a 9 out of 10, or actually let's say country, because I'm not really much of a country fan. If it's a 9 out of 10 country album, I'm going to love it. It's going to be awesome because it's just that good. It's undeniable, no matter, I mean,
right,
if you're receptive to music as a person.
right,
But some things, they break all genre constraints, because people from different camps, different schools of thought can hear this song and they're like, wow, that's a great song. I
exactly.
mentioned Adele earlier, and she's one of the artists that did that. Billie Eilish managed to do it with the prog scene. I couldn't believe how many uh, guys from the prog world I'd see in forums that were pushing Billie Eilish. So, when something is undeniable, it doesn't matter what it is. It's just, it's powerful, and your, past reservations about whatever it may be don't matter.
Right, right. And the one thing that what I try to say is music is a personal thing. Really deep down, it's a personal thing because it's emotional. Even some of the basic music, it's like it. I think if you the first time you hear it, and if there was an event that happened around it, whether it's good or bad, you're always going to remember that song, and it's going to kick an emotion, even if the song has nothing to do with that moment. It's just that song you heard, and it, I guess the word
Yeah, your brain's
trigger.
just connecting it to certain emotions, things you were feeling at the time.
Yeah,
It's like, you know, if you're on vacation and something real memorable happens and there's a song on the background, that song might not have anything to do with what's going on, but you will forever associate that moment with that song.
yeah, and I'll tell you, with your music, I've been listening to it quite a few times,
That's
and
awesome to hear.
I've been listening to, especially the full length album. I've been listening to quite a few times, and I like that it doesn't sound like other bands that I listen to. So it gives me more of a variety that it's like, oh, I can't lump them in one area because they really don't sound like anything that I usually listen to.
That's that's one reason I try to just listen to a lot of different music, because what I'm one of the primary songwriters, and my goal is just to fill for myself, basically a void in the music I can find. You know, I'm constantly looking for new bands, looking to fill certain musical needs that I have, things that I want to hear. And if I can't find them, then the only thing we can do is write it as best we can to try to feel that thing that I'm looking to feel.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. It's like, you get bands like yourself, um, that do it that way, but then you get other ones that just basically kind of literally rip off sections from what's become before them, or and honestly in the hip hop world, some of them are just lifting complete songs and just adding their lyrics to it, and it's almost like
So
I kind of
I've thought a lot about that. So in hip hop, it's it's almost like they as a community, you see hip hop artists rise to the top much easier than I see it out of any rock artist. I mean, really, you look at large rock bands these days, there's not very many of them.
no.
There are a few, a handful of them, but it's like it feels in rock like we're all fighting for territory and we're not helping each other rise to the top, kind of like or nothing like hip hop artists do where they all work together. They're featuring each other on tracks. Yeah, there's financial incentive for some of these people in it, obviously. Still got to make money, but they're all helping each other grow and they're growing as like this one giant unit together, going, getting higher and higher. Whereas with rock, it feels like we're all just trying to do our own thing and we're not helping each other at all.
Yeah,
I mean,
that
maybe
that
we don't have the resources to. I don't know what it is, but
well,
I don't.
a friend of mine told said this. He says rock and roll came out of obscurity, you know, and the what do you call it, the underground scene, and it had its moments in the mid to late 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, and then it just kind of slowly went down. And it's just the predecessor to rock was like the big band music, you know. So I think he was basically saying it comes in waves. You know, rock now may be going towards more to the underground scene again, and he says it might be a good idea because then we can start fighting to climb back out.
That was my hope with the pandemic was that it felt like music was basically canceled for a while, where all the musicians I knew were out of work, touring stopped. I had hopes that after all of that, that there would be a demand again for live music, but I haven't really seen any kind of surge in it by music essentially being pushed away for a while. It doesn't feel like there was any sort of change in the culture musically. It doesn't feel like we as a society need it any more than we did before the pandemic, which I think is the problem. A lot of music in the past, it was a cultural phenomenon because it was needed. So,
Right.
do we really need music anymore? I think we're doing it for a different reason these days. We're
Right.
not expressing. I can't really think of anything in the past since like I mean the early 2000s was a great decade for music, a lot across the board, a ton of great stuff came out in that era, but it was less like topical. It wasn't really around a cause that we could all rally around. It was like that was the start of where we were starting to separate, and now with each era it feels like we're going further and further into our own corners. um and none of these genres are really uniting around anything. I mean, look at like punk rock. It's all about rebellion in the beginning. Like there was something culturally people could really rally around. Hip hop, just about like struggle. There was something that as a culture people were able to come together because this music spoke for them.
Right.
And is music really speaking for anybody anymore? I I'm sure
Well,
some bands do, but I don't hear it quite like I did even growing up. I don't, a lot of the 90s, I was able to feel so much emotion in you had a lot of guys back then that were drug addicts, heavy alcoholics, a lot of them killed themselves and you could feel that in the music. They were saying something that was real.
yeah.
Um and that's what I personally am missing. I don't hear it as much anymore. It still comes across now and again. Actually, one of the pandemic album I would say that has that feeling to me would be Willow Smith's. I don't know if it's a newest release, but Coping Mechanism. It's like product of the pandemic.
Right.
But I would say there's a pop album that has some real feeling in it. For me, that was one of the best albums I've heard in a long time because it did capture sincerity.
Right. you know, you talk about clubs, you know, I heard across the country a lot of clubs closed because they they couldn't get any live acts during this, you know, most of 2020 and 2021, and I think a lot of them closed because they they were not useful anymore.
I thought we were going to be able to have like speakeasies with music, even just like acoustic acts or something where people would meet up and just play music. I thought that was going to be something like rebellious and music was going to be like dangerous again, you know?
Yeah,
Didn't
that's the one
happen.
that's the one thing, especially in rock music, it doesn't seem to be dangerous.
No, like I've said before to the band, like we got to go out and get arrested. But then I think about like I always talk myself out of it afterward. But that's what bands used to do. They used to just be wild, and it was like that's what rock and roll was just
Rebellion.
yeah.
I mean, and I think also too nowadays people like to have music as background noise.
Yeah, we're
I
so
mean,
everyone's multitasking all the time, and I am no better. I do it all the time. I'll be on my phone while I'm watching TV. I'm playing video games while I'm listening to music. I mean, it's tough. There's
yeah, it
so much
is.
going on these days, and we feel there's so much content. We feel stressed out because there's so much to consume all the time.
Yeah, I see a lot of people on Facebook basically going, I'm getting rid of this because, you know, are you getting rid of it because personally because maybe it's just not that, or you getting sometimes I notice when people get rid of things, they're doing it because someone else they're
Yeah,
follow
and I typically don't trust when people announce that they're quitting anything. I mean, if it's it's like I say, I was a smoker for a long time, and every time I try quitting, my stance was if I'm gonna say I'll quit after this pack, then I'm not ready to quit because you got to just abandon it right there. No one last, no farewell post, just throw it in the garbage and forget about it. You have to just get rid of it right now, and that's it. And if you're not willing to do that, we'll see you again soon.
oh yeah, you know, for me it was I mean, I'm sure a lot of people fell under this where I was listening to what everybody was saying about music. And so I think in 2020 and 2021, I think I bought the most CDs in a year than I ever did prior. I mean, I would, let's say, for example, prior, I would maybe buy 20 CDs in the whole entire year. I think I doubled and maybe almost tripled that because I was seeing everybody was recommending me stuff left and
Yeah.
right. I'm like going, oh my God, you know, almost like an overload, but it was like a pleasant overload because it's like, oh, I never heard of this band. I want to learn about it. And that's where I use Spotify or YouTube to find out if that recommendation holds up for
Yeah.
me. You know, does this person actually know my musical taste to say buy this album, you know, or listen to this band, you know, and it's like,
Yeah, I
but
mean, I understand wanting to use something like Spotify for that reason because I I don't believe in blindly supporting the like musicians. Say if I will on a small scale if I see local musicians like pushing whatever they've got, unless it's just repulsive, I'm gonna, I'll at least share your link. At the very least, it's the best I can do. Um, but for donating money is a little different. I don't have our project is expensive enough and we need all the money we can get.
right,
So if somebody's doing a project that I really don't support, I don't believe in what they're doing, I'm not going to help them financially. If they want me to share a link, sure, no problem. I'll do that. I'll bring my friends to your show to come see it. But for money, that's a little different because
right.
I mean it's like I was saying, that's the unfortunate reality is like I was saying before about rock musicians fighting for territory. It is so expensive to to put out a rock album. And then with what modern standards are for you need YouTube videos for all your singles. I mean, none of that's cheap. We have this expectation as consumers, like all of this is just readily available to content creators, but it's not. I mean,
Right.
it's an album cycle is basically on the low end. You're probably looking at like a year's salary for some people.
Right.
So it can be very challenging to find ways to cut costs. I mean, that's been my thing. Every album, I try to just look for, okay, how can we just cut more costs, more expenses out of this? Because if you don't, it's not sustainable long term, but you have to meet a certain quality standard that if you don't meet, nobody's going to take you seriously. So
Exactly.
it's very difficult. And labels won't even entertain you if you don't have a sizable following, you don't have all of your videos ready to go, record mixed and mastered and ready to print. I mean, and then at that point, it's like, well, what do you need them for? But I guess they're kind of the gatekeepers for distribution. They still have a lock on what people can hear. It's very challenging to find a band like us. Um, it's, I guess very grassroots, organic, word of mouth right now
Exactly.
because it's hard to break through that algorithmic wall to
Yeah,
let's
that's the one thing I noticed with algorithms. It's like they may be the concept of an algorithm might work, but
I'm in Head with Wings, so on Spotify, I've typed in our name many times to show people the songs. And when I type in, I think uh, when I type in Head with, I still don't think it even comes up fully. A playlist comes up, but the band name doesn't come up right away. And I'm
right.
somebody that's typed it in tons of times, so I know it can't be easily searchable for people. And I know other bands that struggle. They have the same problem. It's just hard to find some of these bands until you get over a certain threshold. It's you're relatively non-existent in the gamut of things.
Exactly. Yeah, and I mean, there's a few of them when exactly like that. Especially if they have more than one word as a band, or separated words. It's like you would expect. Honestly, logically, if you came up with head with and you don't type wings, that should come up, because if you're in their system, it should be the next thing, unless there's another head with, you know, something else, but then it should have all of those things
We
show up.
Yeah, I I guess just, it's not as easily accessible to somebody searching for things like myself. If I find an album I like, I'll usually find things that are comparable in success or stylistically nearly identical through the algorithm. I'm not going to find something that's I thought Pandora was doing at a point where it was kind of analyzing sonically what was happening, and then it was referring music to you that way. Like, oh, you like minor keys. Here's some songs that have more minor tonality. Uh, I thought at a point that that's what they were doing, but I kind of signed up for the Spotify camp early on, and it's hard to switch over to the other side once you're on your team. You usually stick with that one and don't
Right.
subscribe to any of the others.
Yeah, it's like I kind of at the beginning when Spotify was first coming out. See, I think what another pitfall with Spotify, and I think it's kind of a major pitfall, is it becomes people's library. You
In
know,
lieu of albums or
in lieu
CDs.
of albums, and they could be love that album from beginning to end, and it could be like their timeless choice, or a desert island choice, but they don't actually own a physical copy of it, and it's almost like, um, if you like it that much, and you mentioned it too. It's like, if you like something that much, you buy it.
Well, I was having this conversation with somebody earlier today. pretty much everyone is asking for another $5 these days. Like, subscribe to my Patreon, follow me on here, just $5 a month. There is so much content and there are so many things I would love to give money to, but I just can't. And
Exactly.
I understand when, it's tough for people to subscribe to one more thing and pay for one more thing. Granted, maybe I look at it differently because I'm asking for $20 every 2 years. When we put out an album, just throw another 20 in the pile if you like what we're doing. It helps out. But I do get it that there's so much content out for free that people may not even really, they might not be capable of helping out, but they might also not even realize that's if they love something that much, it might not even occur to them that it's somebody like you or I that's trying to build something. They might
Right.
look at it as, it's this gigantic corporation or something massive way beyond them that doesn't need their money because it's done something so great.
Right.
Sometimes a small project, independent filmmakers, these small teams can surprise you and you would think it was done by something that had all the money in the world when really like they could benefit from $5 if you had it to give. But
Well,
it doesn't seem that way all the time.
on band camps, ever since the pandemic started, they have this Bandcamp Friday. The first Friday of every month, all the whatever you buy. Let's say if I bought, I don't know if I did buy it on a Bandcamp Friday, but if you buy it on there, you get all the money that let's say the album's $15, you get all of that. And I think that's fantastic because while it's not benefiting me, the consumer, it's benefiting you, the band, to be able to make some more music. And I can't support every single, like you were basically saying,
Yeah.
can't support every single person. So it's each month I have to pick one or two artists that really 100% catches my ear, and then I'll do that. I mean, it's like
Yeah, and I mean it really should be that way. I mean, we can't, as much as I would love to rise to the top, we can't all just be at the top. It
right,
is a fight getting there, and I mean, personally, I think that struggle and the basically some of that resistance is what I think creates great content. Now there's a need for expression. I'm not doing it for a job because I have to. I'm doing it because I need to. And I don't know, maybe if we were super successful and it was my job, I don't know if I probably, my whole how I experience life is different at that point. I'm certainly going to be a different songwriter at that point because I write very emotionally and how I'm trying to express feelings. If you put me in, some of these artists that are pulling in millions of dollars from streaming, then I don't know, my life certainly would be very different. I wouldn't feel the way I feel about anything, and maybe I'd start making dance music.
but I think if you follow your heart, even if you don't make a ton of money like some of the bigger acts, it's like when it becomes a job, you know, the fun starts to kind of go away. And because I'm sure when you picked up your instrument, you said, I'm not doing this because that's my job. I'm doing it because this is how I feel and this is how I like to express myself. And then got into a band, and it's like all the members are like going, yeah, this is the way we want to express ourselves. This is the music that we're going to do. Whether it's, I mean, yeah, you would want pop to be popular, want people to say, hey, Head with Wings, I know them. I've seen them, or I have all their albums, or something like that, or I've seen all their videos. It's nowadays, I think you really hit it right. It's like there's so much things coming at the consumer that, you know, where do we start?
Yeah, I mean, I personally, my goals for music would really just to be that it's self-sustaining, to where, financially, to be just a musician, I think is probably impossible these days. Even successful music outside of things like, Shakira, these titans at the top, um, you take bands like, I don't know, Periphery, they're really successful in the metal world, but it seems like the money that they have is really coming from the pedals that they create, the um like the mixing software. I know one of them is like does these neural DSPs that you could download so you get a sound. So they're selling these other products off of a name that they built through their band, but those other avenues they've diversified their income and make enough money through these other sources. But they would even say that bands don't make enough money off just their albums. So I guess that's a luxury in itself. If and a goal really is, if you can put out an album and it can pay for itself enough so you could just keep going, do the next one, that would be great. To where
Yeah,
it's not like that. That's our biggest struggle with releases, is how are we going to afford to do it? Sometimes it makes it more exciting, but it right now we're like, a lot of the holdups are budgetary. So, like, we
right.
have to kind of move carefully, because any money that's invested poorly could hold up the project, or nothing's going to make it not happen. But if we invest $5,000 and it amounts to nothing in one avenue, in one area, that's now 5,000 we don't have for something else.
Right.
It's just totally out the window, and we got to make up for it somehow. But we're going to make mistakes. We're still, every album cycle, I feel like we try things a little differently to see what happens.
Right.
We pick up a little bit more traction each go around. So, I mean, things are still, in hindsight, going well. I've, with this band, accomplished all the dreams I set for myself in high school playing guitar. Like, okay, I wanted to put out a serious album that got in a magazine, and I wanted to go overseas, and
Right.
we've done that. So now it's just, how do we keep it going?
Exactly. Yeah, I mean, in America, they have a few festivals, uh, Ross Fest, which is down in Florida.
Yeah, we played the last Rozfest.
Yeah, and then of course you have Prague Day, which is in, I think it's North Carolina. And I think the unique thing about that is that if the weather is good, it's all outdoors. So it's like someone said it's kind of like going to a picnic and you got, like an old county fair, and then there's the music right there for you to listen to. And then there's something called Prague Stock, which is in New Jersey. It just seems like everything right now is on the East Coast of those
Yeah,
festivals. There used to be some out in the West. Really huge ones out there, and
there's Prague Power. Is that another one? Prague Power USA. I
yeah,
think that's out
yeah.
west.
No, no, that's in Georgia.
Is it?
Yeah, all the way down there. Kind of an odd place for it. I wouldn't expect, you know, metal to be that strong down, but it is. So it's like it. Um, I think there really needs to be something up in the New England area.
I mean, I couldn't tell you where the hot spot for prog rock is.
It's
Um, we thought Europe was where it really is. To me, it's not a popular American genre anymore. I think maybe in the 70s people were more receptive to it, but
right.
I think these days it's very foreign, I think, of a style.
yeah, and it's like, and also too,
Though you get bands like, I would say bands like Muse that they definitely have progressive tendencies, but also mainstream tendencies. So they're kind of like potentially indoctrinating some people into the genre.
right,
So I think bands like that are very important. You need groups like that that can kind of like hold people's hands into it. You know, you certainly can't go from listening to mainstream pop to then hearing one of these 20-minute prog epics
right. Yeah, that's true. I mean,
and tolerating that. There's no way.
other, some epics that are easy to the ears, and it ends, even if it's like a 20-minute or 30-minute, and it ends, and it's like, that was 30 minutes, you know? But
If it
then,
has that feeling, that's when it was well done. When the time
yeah,
passes and I don't sense, I mean, I've listened to a 4-minute song where I'm like checking my watch, like, how long is this? If
ex-
if I never get that sense and it's just right, then I don't care how long it is. There you could have a 50-minute song if I'm just captivated and enthralled and
yeah,
it's doing what it needs to do.
exactly. That's, uh, that's what I like about music. I don't want to be looking at watching the seconds go by on the thing. I just want to be basically taken over. The music take me over, and I just sit back. I mean, a lot of times I have my headphones on, and there's a T-shirt I need to get. It says headphones on, no, music on, world off, or headphones on, world off. Something like that.
Yeah,
Where it's
just
like,
get that total separation.
yeah, just to completely escape from what's going on in the world. You get, like, for you example, you're down in the basement. If you're listening to the music, you have your headphones on. The world is up there, and you're down there just, escaping it all. Even if it's for a few minutes, it's an escape, and that's what I like about music, is that it gives me an escape for just various reasons.
Yeah, I mean that's kind of the goal. You want to get people like hooked onto it, and that's the best way is to give them a break from reality. I tend to I think that's it's one reason why I like stories in our music more that are totally fictitious because sometimes I do want a total break from reality. That doesn't mean I need to experience like these happy songs. It could be like a really dark, miserable world, but it's still different. It's not the real one. It's just a story that I get to over like look at and observe and think about.
Right. You know, uh, uh, uh you know, in the 70s, they spoke of wizards and dragons and stuff like that. And, some people that really analyze that music, they always said that there's some sort of an allegory to it. And I just think that it's just good storytelling. You know, if it's something that someone saw in the real world or something, and then they just decided to write about it, but in a different way, so, but it's like, I love good storytelling. It's
Yeah.
just, I mean, I don't care what the story is about. I mean, if you get me enthralled in it, I'm gonna be like, okay, you know, what's next? I
Yeah.
mean, I've had a few bands that, there's one band out of Tennessee, Glass Hammer. They put out a trilogy of, kind of in that, Lord of the Rings style, sword and sorcery, and it was just like, oh my god, this is what the kind of music I like. I don't want, sometimes I just don't want to know about what's going on in the real world, because
Yeah.
we're bombarded by that anyways, so it's like, I don't want to ban every band to be like, telling me the woes of the world. It's painfully obvious because we see it on TV every night. so, but
That's what I'm hoping for the culture of music to be able to do, is to be that needed escape again on a large scale, where in past decades that's the only escape there was. I mean, that's probably the difficulty these days is we've got video games, our phone, TV, endless podcasts. There's content for, I mean, you could eternally listen to new content these days. So it's like
oh
you're not
yeah,
struggling to find the escape. The escape is everywhere. There's so many escapes.
right. Yeah, growing up in the 70s and 80s and 90s, it's like, obviously we didn't have the internet and all those things to escape. So the music was a primary thing to escape to. And
Yeah, I mean, at my age, the internet existed, but I never used a computer really until after I'd really started playing guitar. So music was important for me back then because there weren't a whole lot of other options. There weren't all these different things to do. Um, so I mean, I'm happy that I got in the door before. I wonder these days, it's got to be difficult for new people coming in to keep their attention and just like sit down and like practice their guitar. It's got to be so frustrating with how fast paced everything is now to
yeah, it's like,
sit down with something that's going to take you months, years. I mean, I've been playing for over 20 years and I feel like I'm only now starting to recognize patterns on the guitar to where I'm like, "Oh, it's symmetrical after all." And it took me 23 years to figure that out.
I think that's the part of life is you got that journey. You learn new things all the time, and you do kind of look back and say, what did I do? It's like you see something like I look back when I see these TV shows like retro where they, like Stranger Things
Yeah,
and recently I just saw Netflix That 90s show.
that's already out.
Yeah, and I was
I
watching that and I was like going, I was just gonna be turning 29 when I just turned 29 when this stuff was taking place, and just was like memories coming back, and I was like, oh my God, did it really happen that way? You know, you know,
I'll have to check it out because I wonder if,
yeah.
just for the sake of nostalgia, if it would be fun to
I
to
think
see
it
it.
I think it was, but then again, it's
Musically, I think back on the 90s and I love the 90s. I have such a soft spot for it. 'Cause that was during like my formative years up to I was born in 89. So all the music I heard when I was young, it's like I associate it with some of my first experiences and things. So some of those songs, maybe if you showed them to me today, I wouldn't like them, but there's something about them that's just my brain loves it, and I can't explain the connection I have to the sound of that era, but I'm very attached to it.
oh yeah, yeah. It's like the a friend of mine told me years ago, and I think for me personally, it fits. You always go back to what the first music you like to listen to, or the first music that held you, held your attention. When I was growing up, I didn't really care until I was in my mid-teens about music. It was just on the radio. Whatever was playing in my parents' car stereo, whatever was played in, wherever I went, or if I listened to top 40 music, it wasn't as important. But then everything that I kind of go revisit is in the 80s, everything that I picked up in the 80s, I have repurchased.
Yeah.
I kind of wish that I didn't get rid of it, or if I, only had it on cassette, and then to get it on CD 30, 40 years later, it's like, so it's like I think you do in a way kind of get nostalgic and you want to go back to a time when you first, got into music and music really grabbed hold of you, you know, uh, the- I just think that's a wonderful thing. It doesn't matter how old you are. You could be 33, 56, or 70 something. It's the music that really got you,
And as long as you keep making new experiences, then that means there was always room for new, uh, I guess, I don't want to say background noise, or maybe like the theme song to that memory in a way.
Right.
There's our Headwing's first tour in Germany. There are songs that happened that I heard during that trip for the first time. Or even there's some when we shot a music video, we drove down to North Carolina, and there were songs I heard for the first time on that trip. Those songs will always be associated with those memories, and they're very positive. So, hearing those songs brings back some of these good memories.
So when is the second full album coming?
This, we we're hoping this coming year. It's done right now, but we're just getting essentially the assets together. If you sooner than later, we're just we'll be able to give you a link to listen to it privately if you want to check it out.
Okay.
Uh, but we haven't quite gotten to the point where I guess we don't know exactly what we're doing with it yet. We want to try to see if there's label interest. Usually, with every release, we want to see if maybe there's some label interest in it, and then 'cause the biggest thing is um, making sure it gets enough exposure. So we're trying to be very calculated with it and make sure we don't just drop it, have it fall on deaf ears, and then have the problem of people don't want to review an album that's not, premiering. Um, YouTube algorithm doesn't care about things that aren't new. Same thing with Facebook. So if the plan is that we can formulate the right plan soon. We originally were hoping for quarter 1, but things came up. We had some problems, and now it's getting pushed back. Maybe quarter 2 if all goes well. But it's tough when you're looking for your. Right now we're looking for visualizers, for example, somebody to do a visualizer for us. So then the start of that is finding like who's going to do it. It's not just there's not just the guy that does visualizers and he's going to do a great job. We could get the visualizer back and decide that we don't like this,
Right.
and then we'll have paid for that. We have something we're not happy with, and then we got to wait another 6 months or so to find somebody else, work with them, hope we get it right this time.
There's
So it's hard to say, but we're trying to do it as soon as we possibly can.
Well, there've been a few bands that do interesting things to get their music out. They've Some of them did like limited run amounts of CDs. Some of them have done digital downloads only, maybe using that as revenue to putting out the physical media. I mean, there's so many different ways to go about it.
Um, well, I think it's so looking at our Bandcamp sales, for example, wouldn't equate to the amount of money a typical promotional campaign would cost. So even by, or at least a large scale one, that would be what we'd probably need to get the exposure that we want to, meet my goal, say, of recouping the costs, being able to cover the costs, the expenses of the next album. Digital releases probably wouldn't do that. Vinyl may, but that's a big expense on our part that you need to have the upfront money for. And then it becomes, do we dump all the money into vinyl or do we dump it all into here? Everything's kind of a gamble at the moment. I think the stream cut out or paused or Well, I'm going to guess that I'm not sitting in here alone live, or maybe I am. Guess we'll give Ron a moment to come back or see what's going on. This is awkward because it says live on the feed and I just see it staring at me. But I don't know if I'm just sitting in a room by myself. Okay, Ron thinks he disconnected. So I'm going to sit here, awkwardly if anyone's watching, and wait for Ron. I could. So yes, I am sitting here alone. There's a delay on the feed, and I was able to just watch myself do that. So the whole thing is a little bit more uncomfortable now. Don't worry, I'm going to stay here and sit until we figure this out. All right, Ron's trying to get back in. Send that link out.
All right.
Oh, there we are. All right, I was just trying to send you the link out.
Yeah, I don't know what happened there, but I just froze up.
So that'll be fun because I wasn't sure if I disconnected and was just looking at myself on my own webcam. So after talking to myself for a minute, I opened up the feed on my other monitor, and yes, I was streaming live on YouTube, talking to myself. So that'll be fun.
Yeah. So we were going back, talking about the music, and I really think people out there that are in progressive rock should check your band out.
Yeah, I mean, I'd appreciate if they did.
I really think, because it really falls into that scope of true progressive rock, because you're using that word progressive, with meaning.
That's great that you feel that way. I mean, certainly that's what I set out to do, is to try
Right.
to just do something that was unique. And I'm not saying we're not reinventing the wheel by any means. We're not pioneers of a new genre. We're just trying to. We've got within the band just different musical tastes. We meet. We have some common ground, but really we've got 4 or 5, depends on the lineup at the time, different people, and we're just trying to make everyone in the band happy. And if you can please the musical tastes of everyone in this band, then I think we did a good job.
Right. Yeah.
And we fucking struggle to do it.
Right. And also too, for people that go and buy these, on the digital version of this, you guys have like little extra like remixes of.
Yeah, I hope I'm pronouncing his name right now correctly. Vikram Shankar, but he did the piano renditions of Comfort and Illusion. So he performed each one of those songs as. Oh, you know what? Actually, back up a little bit. The first album, From Worry to Shame, he did a piano rendition of the whole album. So it was just using the themes and melodies played on piano, and that was our first time working with him. On Comfort and Illusion, he did remixes of every song, and on the upcoming album, Without Intervention, he performed keyboard and he also mixed and mastered it.
Oh wow, that should make the band dynamic a little bit on a larger scale. Having a
Yeah,
keyboard in there,
yeah, it's I guess it that was the one thing as a prog band we were lacking, where we couldn't quite be prog because we didn't have a keyboard, but we got one now. So
I've heard, there's some good prog bands out there that don't have keyboards. I mean, that
King
band I was
Crimson didn't,
taught.
right?
No, they had some, but not.
But it
It was
wasn't like a.
the dominant thing.
Cause I'm thinking of back to Red, and I can't even think of keys being on there.
Mellotron
Okay.
and but that band Fates Warning, up until the late '90s, they didn't have keyboards on their stuff, and they only had keyboards on one thing. And then later on, I think what their guitar player, did a little bit, just to kind of enhance the overall sound, but it wasn't like a dominating factor. So I think that's what a lot of, from an audience standpoint, they go,
I
oh,
think keyboard can make you sound like you're from a certain era.
yeah,
Having keyboard on our upcoming album definitely makes us sound more modern than our previous albums might. Like, we unquestionably are a band from, the 2010 on, somewhere in there. You didn't really hear bands that had this sort of atmosphere prior, just because the nature of what these synthesizers and the style of mixing, all of that stuff wasn't as common before then. So it kind of dates us a little bit more. It doesn't sound like timeless, but I think it's we brought him on actually we just wanted some supplemental keys on there, and he did such a good job with some of the performances on his like test song that we were just like, you've got free reign, write whatever parts you want, and then we'll so it was treated as if he was just the keyboard player within the band.
right.
We didn't originally we kind of were looking at it like we might just be looking for like pads, like beef up this section a little bit, make this part more ethereal. And we kind of, once we heard what he could do, we didn't really even need to micromanage it at that point anymore.
Right. Or like back in the day, there was it'd be like triggers, you perform the keyboards in your studio, and then you just have someone, whether the guitar player or bass player or drummer, would trigger something, and then the keys come up, sound.
Oh, like Geddy Lee playing keyboard with his feet. Like, it wasn't, I don't actually know what he was doing, but it wasn't by any means, there's no way it was a keyboard. It was something that was triggering.
Oh yes, they call it the bass pedals.
So it was just big. Okay, so just big pedals that would play a chord.
Yeah,
Okay.
and there was one band in the '80s. They've been around since the '60s, but in the '80s, the drummer of Golden Earring, Radar Love.
Oh yeah.
But they did a concert, and it was on MTV when they were a music television, and he put on this vest, and it had the MIDI drums, so he can like tap
Oh,
everywhere.
so it had like, that was the controller.
Yeah, the vest.
That's cool.
And I haven't seen that video since. It'd be so cool to kind of see that again, because I kind of thought that was revolutionary in a way, because it's like,
I've certainly never seen it. If anybody else has done it, I've never seen somebody do it.
I don't think it caught on, because maybe that people probably thought it was more gimmicky than anything, but I thought it was revolutionary, because it's now you can get a little extra sounds out of from the drummer.
Well, maybe I wonder if it just became like unnecessary because there's digital drum kits now. I see drummers a lot of the time they'll have a few pads in their kit and it becomes like it's just a sample that they hit just like it's another drum.
Yeah, I
You ever
think
hear like Sungazer? They have this song Drunk and there's all these like effects in it that I watched a video where the band broke it down what they're doing, and the drummer is creating all the effects that you're hearing in the song just through pads that he has. So he's playing his drum beat, and then he'll just like hit one of these other pads in within his beat, and it creates these effects that it sounds like it's a whole different person playing a different instrument.
right. It could be that MIDI vest evolved into that. Could have been just like early '70s synthesizers evolved into the what we have today. So, and even if it's a specific one that no longer uses, maybe its its use was incorporated into something new. That's another thing that's possible. Uh,
I, yeah, some of those instruments definitely they like you saying it was revolutionary. They did have a big impact on the time. I think back to I forgot what the Dark Side of the Moon documentary is called about Dark Side of the Moon. That might be its name, but I think of a scene with I'm gonna guess it was um, I don't want to wrongly guess which member of Pink Floyd it was, but watching him sit with a synthesizer and just turning the dials and hearing some of these parts come to life, it was, at least for me at the time, I had never seen those kinds of instruments played before. I'm too
exactly.
young to have seen a real synthesizer from back then. I mean, you're talking those would line the entire wall and you have patch cables going everywhere. I've never seen one of those in person. So to see just like this complex machine, essentially, these wires everywhere, and on the other end, you're creating this super trippy atmosphere. It's very interesting, and obviously nothing existed like it before.
Right. Um, so I just want to basically tell people I'll put all your links for your band down below. Obviously the Bandcamp one because I kind of want to push people towards that.
Oh yeah,
Um,
and
and you can go listen to them on Spotify, but I really
I'd
think
say the
that
big thing is like if you really want to support a band these days, follow them wherever you can. Go to YouTube, like, subscribe, comment on something, leave, and then go to Spotify, just follow. All of that stuff is very important because it helps bands get more exposure. It allows them to be part of the algorithm that a lot of bands in our level are struggling to get into.
right, right, and follow on Facebook and Instagram. Everywhere that Head with the Wings is, follow them, and that way you can support them, and also you can get a news when things are coming out, especially the new album whenever that comes out. You'll be. I mean, there's no way that anyone that doesn't follow you won't know when your album comes out.
I hope so. And if any for anyone that enjoyed any of our past work, I would say this one is leagues beyond what we've done thus far. This is, I think, really raising the bar for us. So I'm incredibly proud of it, and I hope people will check it out and give it a chance.
Well, I want to thank you very much for taking the time out of the day. I think I would.
Oh yeah, I
Um,
mean, yeah, thanks for Josh couldn't make it because he had a
yeah,
flight to catch today, but thanks for inviting us on. It was great talking to you. And
yeah, I appreciate. Um, I think nowadays any kind of a press is a good press because you get your name out there. again, an algorithm of sorts. Um, and plus also I like to give, when you were asking what, is it going to be questions or free form? I like it to be free form because then I kind of feel people are more comfortable that way instead of getting
Well, the
questions that have been asked before.
yeah,
It's like it gets tiresome. I'm sure if each time you get interviewed, they say ask the same questions, and it's like you almost want to have like a recording of yourself. Here
yeah.
you go. Save your voice for that. But I like to do it free form, so it's like,
Things organically come together, and I mean,
yeah,
we did talk about the band, but a lot of other things came up, and
right,
I think that's all important in getting to know what somebody's about is not just am I a salesman and how hard can I push this album?
right.
There's a lot more to it, and sometimes it's just how much you're willing to put into the music. Sometimes that can speak for itself.
Right. And then in about 2 weeks is that Bandcamp Friday. So, if I just basically say go over to Bandcamp, listen to the samples, and if you like what you hear, support them the best way you can. Whether you buy a physical copy or a digital copy, it'll help this band really, for the future because
Yeah,
you
and
know
I mean, and even one better, compatible bands. If any bands that are like us, let's get in touch, sync up, and do a show in each other's states. That's a thing we as rock musicians could do more of. Start reaching out to each other and
exactly.
meet
And
somebody in neighboring states. You can put together a tour a lot easier that way when you've got four bands, four different states. Get your local crowd out, and then you can all grow together.
yeah, and I think with technology today, I think we can do that much easier than 20,
Oh
30
yeah,
years ago.
we have
You
so
know,
many tools at our disposal that they're tough to use, but they're there. We have so many more opportunities than everyone that came before us.
yeah. So, I'm gonna pass you guys' name out to some of my friends' bands that I, that I think are compatible, but yet different. I just, you don't want to be paired up with a extreme death metal band. That
We've
just
done it before.
you've done. Oh,
Yeah,
geez.
we played with a doom metal band at one show, and I mean they were good with us being there. They liked our band, and we enjoyed what they did. But I don't know how some people in the audience were receptive to it. But I talked to one guy who was like, not heavy enough." But yeah, what are you gonna do? It was
Yeah,
fun.
yeah, but it'd be nice to get something more compatible in a way, but not exactly the same, you know. But there's quite a few of them that I know that I think, out in the West Coast that I think would be
Yeah, and
perfect.
I welcome things that I don't think prog has to necessarily always fall into like a certain realm of rock either. Sometimes I'll go to shows and if you have three bands that are all like pretty similar, I'm like mentally exhausted on that style. I went to a
Yeah.
ska show recently and it was three ska bands back to back. And by the time the third one, who was the biggest band, came on, I was like checked out on ska.
Right, right. Yeah. That's the a pitfall, it's like, but I'll get you in touch with these people
I appreciate that.
and and you guys are welcome back on when the the new album comes out, and so we could help promote that. And
Oh, definitely. Thanks.
you know, and if by then if it comes out at a when everybody's available, that would be kind of cool to do a full band interview. You know?
Yeah, we haven't done one of those since um in Germany. But yeah, I mean, do you do in-person interviews? That would be
If right now I don't get out of state.
well, I'm saying if we happen to be up north, if we do I don't know. We've been talking more about touring in the Northeast, trying to get something together. Um,
I could probably swing something like that, you know. I mean, I like to be unique by doing this live thing because
yeah,
there's many people that do pre-recorded interviews. I kind This live thing is just like when you guys play live, you know, it just in the moment,
yeah,
you
you're
know.
capturing a moment and just putting it out there, and it is what it is.
Yeah, yeah. I just want it to be a little different than what's out there. I mean, I wouldn't say it's revolutionary, but it's different because everybody else has these pre-recorded interviews or views or you know even discussions you know on any given topic you know and I just like to keep it organic and real.
Yeah, I'm all about that. Whatever keeps things real, genuine, I'm in support of it.
All right, well, thanks again, Brandon. I appreciate you taking the time out on Saturday.
Absolutely, it was great talking to you. I habitually almost just reached out to shake your hand, so whatever
There you go.
the digital equivalent is.
Exactly. Yeah. I appreciate, and I'll keep in touch with you in Facebook and Joshua too.
All right, sounds great.
All right. Well, thank you again, and I'll talk with you soon.
All right,
Uh,
well,
bye bye.
we'll talk soon. Bye.